Have you ever wondered why all the angelic representations we know are always of luminous white beings? What if I told you that even before Adam and Eve walked in Eden, there was a completely different angelic order protecting paradise? Angels that weren't made of golden light, but of a celestial substance that our human minds can only comprehend as black fire. This is not just another religious conspiracy theory. We are talking about apocryphal texts, suppressed archaeological discoveries, and revelations that have been deliberately removed from the canonical Bible over the centuries. The lost black angels represent one of the greatest spiritual revelations humanity has ever possessed, and one that has been systematically erased from our modern religious understanding. Imagine for a moment, if God created a perfect paradise, who or what protected this sacred place before the first human soul was formed? The answer lies in the lost manuscripts of Enoch, the oldest Sumerian texts, and the oral traditions that survived in isolated cultures around the world. They all speak of the same thing, a primordial angelic order that predates everything we know about celestial hierarchies. These dark angels were not evil as Hollywood led us to believe. On the contrary, they were the closest guardians to the divine throne, so pure and powerful that their essence transcended physical light itself. They were made of a spiritual substance so intense that it appeared as darkness to mortal eyes, but was in fact the most concentrated form of divine energy that ever existed. The burning question is, why was this information hidden? Why did religious councils decide that humanity should not know about these primordial guardians? And even more importantly, where are these angels now, and what is their role in the current divine plan? Over the next few minutes, we'll embark on a journey that will challenge everything you thought you knew about angels, paradise, and creation itself. We'll explore banned texts, suppressed discoveries, and connections that will make you question why certain spiritual truths have been hidden from humanity for so long. Prepare to discover that celestial history is far more complex and fascinating than any religious denomination has ever taught. The lost black angels are not merely a historical curiosity. They are a fundamental key to understanding our spiritual origins and our destiny as humanity. This revelation will completely change your perspective on divine protection, on the nature of good and evil, and on how the spiritual world truly works. Because if there's one thing the forces that control religious narratives don't want you to know, it's that you've always had access to a celestial protection far older and more powerful than any traditional prayer could ever invoke. So tell me, are you prepared to learn the truth about the first guardians of paradise? Are you ready to understand why your spiritual protection may be much deeper than you ever imagined? If this topic is sparking your curiosity as I hoped it would, it's crucial that you subscribe to the channel right now, because the content we're sharing today could completely change your spiritual understanding. This knowledge about lost dark angels isn't something you easily find elsewhere. It's information I spent years researching in rare texts and academic sources that rarely reach the general public. Leave a like so that more people can access these revelations, because this type of content needs to circulate. And feel free to comment below if you've heard anything about angelic guardians before human creation, because your participation strengthens our community of seekers of spiritual truth. Now let's get straight to what really matters to understand about this first celestial guard. When we analyze the oldest texts of the Judeo-Christian tradition, especially the manuscripts that did not enter the official biblical canon, we find consistent references to an angelic order that existed long before the creation of man. These were not the angels we know from popular narratives. They were completely different entities, with specific purposes related to the protection and maintenance of the original paradise. The Book of Enoch, for example, describes in detail how these dark angels were responsible for maintaining the energetic purity of Eden. They were not mere observers or messengers like the traditional angels we know. Their function was literally to protect the divine essence of paradise against any spiritual contamination that could threaten the perfection of that sacred environment. Think of it this way: if God created a place of absolute perfection, this place needed guardians capable of recognizing and repelling any energy that was incompatible with that purity. The dark angels possessed this ability because they themselves were made of such a refined spiritual substance that they could detect the slightest energetic distortion thousands of kilometers away. In Sumerian texts, we find similar descriptions of these guardians, called the Dark Anunnaki, not to be confused with the traditional Anunnaki who came to Earth later. These were the protectors of the Garden of the Gods before any physical being was created. They maintained the balance between dimensions, ensuring that paradise remained a perfect portal between the divine realm and physical reality. The most fascinating characteristic of these dark angels was their ability to exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions. While traditional angels need to descend from the celestial realm to interact with our reality, these primordial guardians could be present on all planes of existence at the same time. This made them incomparably more effective as protectors, as they could intercept spiritual threats before they even manifested physically. Another important question is understanding why they were perceived as dark or shadowy. It had nothing to do with evil or negativity. In fact, it was the opposite. They were so concentrated in pure divine energy that they transcended visible light itself. When you look directly at the sun, what do you see? A light so intense that it appears dark to your eyes. The same principle applied to these angels. They were divine light in its most concentrated form. We live in extremely difficult times, in which prophecies are marked, but many still do not realize what is happening in the world. For this, I have made my ebook available, To Reveal the Apocalypse, which you can download immediately through the first set of comments. This book will help you uncover all the mysteries of the apocalypse and transform your life. Go to the first set of comments to get your copy, as very little remains and will be removed soon. Don't waste time. Click now and secure your digital copy. And don't forget to get your Reveal the Apocalypse ebook. It is very important that you buy it quickly before the copies run out. Ancient texts also reveal that these dark angels possessed complete knowledge of the structure of creation. They knew exactly how each element of paradise functioned, from the healing properties of plants to the energy patterns that maintained the perfect harmony of that environment. This knowledge made them not only guardians, but also the first celestial gardeners of creation. When Adam and Eve were created, these dark angels were given the specific mission of protecting humanity without directly interfering with their free will. They became invisible guardians, keeping a constant watch over humanity's spiritual development. But something happened that drastically changed this dynamic, something that canonical scriptures prefer not to mention in detail. The crucial point is to understand that these dark angels did not simply disappear. They were collected or repositioned after a specific event that we will see in the following topics. But their influence and protection never completely ceased. They continue to operate on a more subtle level, awaiting the prophetic moment of their full return to direct action on earth. This understanding completely changes our perspective on spiritual protection, because it means we have access to a lineage of guardians far older and more powerful than any modern religious tradition teaches. The lost dark angels represent our most direct connection to the original divine protection, predating all the theological complications that have arisen throughout human history. Now tell me in the comments, can you feel that there is a spiritual protection operating in your life that goes beyond what you have learned in traditional religions? Comment primordial guardians if this information resonates with some deep intuition you've always had about your spiritual protection. Let's now delve into the lost scriptures where we find the most detailed descriptions of these black fire angels. When I speak of lost scriptures, I'm not referring only to the known apocryphal books, but also to fragments of texts that have been discovered at archaeological sites and have never reached the general public. These documents contain information that would literally revolutionize our understanding of angels and celestial protection. In the Book of Enoch, specifically in the chapter that was removed from the Greek translations, we find the most accurate description of these beings. They are called seraphim of the dark flame, seraphim that possess 6 wings like the traditional ones, but whose purifying fire does not emit visible light, but rather an energy that penetrates directly into the spiritual essence of everything they touch. This black fire has the ability to purify without destroying, to transform without altering the original essence of things. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain references to these angels in texts that are rarely discussed publicly. There is a specific fragment that describes how these guardians were responsible for establishing the sacred boundaries of Eden. Not just the physical boundaries, but the energetic boundaries that separated paradise from all other dimensions of existence. They created a kind of spiritual force field that maintained the absolute purity of that environment. Another fascinating text is found in the Nag Hammadi Papyri, where these angels are described as the Watchers of the First Order. Unlike the Watchers who later rebelled and descended to Earth to mingle with human women, these Watchers of the First Order maintained their purity and never abandoned their posts. They continued guarding paradise even after humanity was expelled from it. What is most impressive in these scriptures is the description of how these black fire angels communicated with each other. They did not use words or sounds as we know them, but communicated through frequencies of pure energy that could transmit complex information instantly across any distance. This form of communication allowed them to maintain perfect coordination in protecting paradise, responding to any threat in real time. One particularly intriguing detail found in the lost texts is that these angels possessed the ability to see through time. They could perceive not only what was happening in the present, but also the future consequences of each action and event. This temporal vision made them incredibly effective guardians, as they could prevent problems before they even manifested. The texts also reveal that each dark angel possessed a unique specialization. Some were experts in protecting specific elements of creation. There were guardians of the waters, guardians of the plants, guardians of the animals, and even guardians of the pure thoughts that emanated from God Himself. This specialization allowed for extremely detailed and efficient protection of all aspects of paradise. One of the most surprising revelations in these lost scriptures is that these black fire angels possess the authority to directly interfere with physical reality when necessary. They could temporarily alter natural laws to protect that which was under their care. This ability completely set them apart from traditional angels, who generally must work within the limitations of established natural laws. The texts also describe how these angels were able to instantly heal any damage or corruption that managed to penetrate their defenses. Their black fire not only purified but also restored everything to its original state of perfection. This capacity for instant restoration ensured that paradise maintained its absolute purity, regardless of any external event. Another fascinating aspect revealed in these scriptures is that the black fire angels possessed a direct connection to the creative essence of God. They not only protected what already existed, but also actively participated in the ongoing process of creation and renewal of paradise. They were, at the same time, guardians and co-creators, maintaining Eden not as a static environment, but as a place in constant evolution and improvement. These lost scriptures also explain why these angels were so feared by other spiritual entities. Their purity and power were so intense that any being not in perfect harmony with the divine simply could not remain in their presence. They were like an absolute spiritual filter, allowing only that which was in perfect harmony with original holiness. What fascinates me most is that many of these scriptures suggest that our contact with these black fire angels was never completely interrupted. Even after all the events that led to the withdrawal of these guardians, there are still specific ways to access their protection and guidance. Comment: black fire. If you've ever had a spiritual experience involving a very intense feeling of protection or purification, but that you couldn't explain through traditional religious practices, I want to know if you also feel this ancestral connection. Now we come to one of the most unsettling questions in this entire investigation. Why has such fundamental information about our primordial celestial guardians been systematically removed from official religious teachings? The answer to this question reveals one of the greatest spiritual manipulations in human history, and the implications are absolutely transformative for our understanding of religion, power, and spiritual control. First, we need to understand that the concealment of this truth was neither accidental, nor did it happen all at once. It was a deliberate and coordinated process that took place over several centuries, beginning with the early Christian councils and intensifying during the consolidation of papal power. Religious leaders realized very early on that knowledge about the lost dark angels represented a direct threat to the system of spiritual control they were establishing. Think of it this way: if people knew they had direct access to celestial protection that predated any religious institution, what need would there be for human intermediaries? If the faithful understood that they could invoke primordial guardians who possess power and authority superior to the archangels traditionally worshipped, why would they depend on priests, bishops, or popes for their spiritual protection? Historical Vatican documents, many of which remain sealed to this day, show that there was a profound knowledge of these dark angels among the early church fathers. St. Augustine, for example, wrote extensively about these earlier guardians in private letters that were never included in his official works. He recognized that these beings possessed a spiritual authority that transcended the established ecclesiastical hierarchy. The Council of Nicaea in 325 AD was a pivotal moment in this concealment. While most people know this council for establishing the official Christian creed, few know that a significant portion of the discussion specifically involved which texts about angels should be preserved or banned. Texts mentioning dark angels were classified as dangerous to the unity of the faith, not because they were theologically heretical, but because they gave too much power to ordinary individuals. During the Middle Ages, the Inquisition played a key role in suppressing any remaining knowledge about these primordial guardians. Many of the heretics burned at the stake were not merely people who questioned doctrines, but individuals who maintained oral traditions about spiritual practices involving the direct invocation of dark angels. The Church realized that these practices were spreading and threatening its authority as the sole path to salvation. One of the best documented cases is that of the group known as the Guardians of the Eternal Fire, a mystical order that existed secretly between the 12th and 14th centuries. This group maintained specific practices to contact the lost dark angels and reported extraordinary results in terms of protection, healing, and spiritual guidance. When the Inquisition discovered this order, it not only executed its members, but also systematically destroyed all of its texts and artifacts. Another crucial reason for the concealment was economic. The medieval church had built an entire economy based on the sale of indulgences, relics, and spiritual services. If people discovered that they could access heavenly protection and blessings directly through the primordial guardians, this entire economic system would collapse. The financial dependence of the faithful was fundamental to maintaining the church's temporal power. During the Renaissance, there was an attempt by humanist scholars to recover some of this lost knowledge. Figures such as Pico della Mirandola and Marsilio Ficino had access to ancient manuscripts containing information about black angels. However, the pressure from the church was so intense that they were forced to keep this knowledge within extremely restricted circles, codified in symbols and allegories that only initiates could understand. The Protestant Reformation could have been an opportunity to reveal these truths, but the Reformers were so focused on combating Catholicism that they ended up maintaining many of the same suppressions. Martin Luther even mentioned in private letters that he had found texts about angels earlier than those known, but decided not to include them in his traditions because he considered them too revolutionary for the time. In the modern period, the concealment continues through more subtle mechanisms. Theological universities simply do not include these texts in their curricula. Religious publishers refuse to publish complete translations of the relevant manuscripts, and archaeological organizations frequently classify related discoveries as sensitive material, requiring further analysis that is never completed or made public. What impresses me most is that this concealment continues even today, in the information age. There are digital libraries that possess these ancient texts, but they are kept in restricted access sections or presented in such an academic and fragmented way that practical knowledge about how to contact these dark angels remains hidden from the general public. The truth is that the Church has always known that the lost dark angels represent the most direct and powerful form of spiritual connection available to humanity. They are our original celestial heritage, predating all the theological complications and power structures that arose later. And that is precisely why this knowledge has been so carefully suppressed. Tell me in the comments if you've ever noticed how certain spiritual information seems to be deliberately kept away from popular knowledge. Write hidden truth if you feel there is much more spiritual knowledge available than traditional religions teach us. Now we will explore one of the most profound revelations about the lost dark angels, their true identity as dark cherubim, the closest guardians to the very throne of God. This information will completely challenge everything you thought you knew about celestial hierarchies and who truly holds supreme authority in the spiritual realm. When most people think of cherubim, they immediately picture those chubby baby angels from Renaissance art. But the true cherubim, described in Ezekiel's visions and other prophetic texts, are entities of unparalleled power, and the dark cherubim represent the highest order of this angelic class. They are not only guardians of the divine throne, but are literally part of the very structure of God's throne. In the original Hebrew texts, we find references to the cherubim chashuk, the cherubim of the holy darkness. This darkness does not represent an absence of light, but rather the presence of a light so intense and pure that it completely transcends our capacity for perception. It is like looking directly into the core of a star. Its intensity is perceived as darkness by our limited senses. What makes the dark cherubim unique is that they possess unrestricted access to the direct presence of God. While other angels must await permission or summons to approach the divine throne, the dark cherubim reside permanently in this supreme proximity. They are constant witnesses to all divine decrees and actively participate in the process of manifesting God's will in creation. A fascinating characteristic of these beings is that they possess multiple faces, as described in Ezekiel, but their faces are composed of pure spiritual substance. They can simultaneously manifest aspects of wisdom, power, love, and divine justice, not as separate qualities but as integrated facets of a single perfect essence. This multiplicity of aspects makes them capable of understanding and executing any aspect of the divine will instantly. The dark cherubim also have a specific function as cosmic recorders. They keep a complete record of all events that occur in all dimensions of existence. Every thought, every action, every intention throughout the universe is known and cataloged by them. This is not a function of judgment, but rather of maintaining cosmic harmony. They ensure that all spiritual consequences are properly balanced. Another crucial aspect is that these cherubim possess the ability to alter the very structure of reality when necessary. They not only protect the throne of God, but also ensure that the integrity of all creation is maintained. If any distortion in reality threatens cosmic balance, the dark cherubim have the authority to intervene directly and restore the original order. What fascinates me most is that the dark cherubim possess a special connection with humanity that is not shared by other angelic classes. They were specifically designated as our origin guardians, meaning that every human being has a direct connection with one of these cherubim, established at the moment of our individual soul's creation. This connection has never been broken, even after all the events that led to our expulsion from paradise. This individual connection with the dark cherubim explains why some people possess highly developed spiritual intuitions or profound mystical experiences without having undergone any formal religious training. They are consciously or unconsciously accessing the wisdom and protection of their designated cherub. This is a spiritual heritage that we all possess, but which has been forgotten due to the suppression of this knowledge. Ancient texts also reveal that the dark cherubim are responsible for keeping open the dimensional portals that allow communication between the celestial realm and our reality. They control the flow of spiritual energy that keeps our physical dimension connected to its divine source. Without this constant maintenance by the dark cherubim, our reality would simply cease to exist. During periods of great spiritual turmoil on Earth, the dark cherubim intensify their activity. They begin to intervene more directly in human affairs, paving the way for important transformations. Many of the great spiritual awakenings in human history have been precipitated by the direct action of these supreme guardians. One particularly striking revelation is that the dark cherubim possess the ability to seed knowledge directly into human consciousness. They can implant insights, understandings, and even specific skills in individuals who are aligned with important divine purposes. This is the explanation for many of the inexplicable discoveries in science, art, and spirituality throughout history. The most transformative aspect of this understanding is realizing that our connection with the dark cherubim gives us access to a level of protection and guidance that surpasses any religious system or spiritual practice developed by humans. They represent our direct line to the supreme authority in the universe, without the need for intermediaries or institutional interpretations. This is literally the highest form of celestial protection available, and it is accessible to each of us through our original connection established at creation. The dark cherubim are waiting for us to rediscover this heritage and learn to consciously work with them again. Comment dark cherub if you've ever had experiences of protection or spiritual guidance that seem to come from a much higher and more powerful source than any traditional religious practice you know. The time has come to reveal one of the most shocking and systematically hidden truths in celestial history, the forgotten war that divided heaven into two distinct eras and explains why the lost dark angels were repositioned in the celestial hierarchy. This war was not the Luciferian rebellion we all know. It was a much earlier and infinitely more complex conflict that completely redefined the structure of the celestial realm. In the oldest texts, especially in the fragments found in the Library of Alexandria before its destruction, we find references to a period known as the Great Celestial Division. This event occurred long before the creation of humanity and involved a fundamental dispute over how creation should be protected and governed. On one side were the dark cherubim and the traditional black angels, advocating a system of direct protection and active intervention. On the other side, a new angelic order that believed in protection through detachment and non-interference. The conflict began when a celestial philosophy emerged, suggesting that creation should have greater autonomy to develop without direct interference from the primordial guardians. This new school of thought argued that the constant protection of the dark angels was preventing creation from reaching its full evolutionary potential. They proposed a system where the celestial guardians would act only as distant observers and guides. The lost dark angels, led by the shadow cherubim, vehemently opposed this proposal. They argued that their direct protective function was fundamental to maintaining the purity and integrity of creation. For them, allowing creation to develop without constant supervision would be like allowing a child to explore a minefield unprotected. The war that followed was not a physical one as we imagine human conflicts to be. It was a war of principles, energies, and spiritual authorities. For celestial millennia, these two factions debated, argued, and tested different approaches to the protection of creation. The celestial realm was literally divided into two distinct operational philosophies. The turning point came when a third force emerged in the conflict, entities that were neither angels nor demons, but something entirely different. Some texts call them the neutrals or the balancers. These beings proposed a compromise solution that would forever change the celestial structure. The dark angels would retain their authority and power, but would act in a more subtle way, allowing other angelic orders to assume the more visible roles of protection and guidance. This solution was accepted, but with specific conditions. The lost dark angels agreed to retreat to a deeper level of operation, maintaining their protection but allowing humanity, when it was created, to experience apparent free will. In return, they would retain absolute authority to intervene directly in times of extreme crisis or when the very existence of creation was threatened. The result of this war was the creation of what the texts call the Age of Veiled Protection. The lost dark angels did not disappear or lose their power. They simply began to operate in a less visible way. Their protection became more subtle, more integrated into natural processes, and less dependent on obvious miraculous manifestations. One of the most significant consequences of this war was the creation of different levels of celestial authority. The angels we traditionally know, Gabriel, Michael, Raphael, are actually representatives of the new order that assumed visible functions after the war. But the lost dark angels maintained supreme authority behind the scenes, operating as a kind of celestial shadow government. This dual structure explains many mysteries of human spiritual experience. Why are prayers sometimes answered instantly, and other times seem to have no effect? Because there are two systems operating simultaneously: the visible system of traditional angels and the invisible system of lost dark angels. Depending on the nature of the situation, one system or the other responds. The war also established specific rules about when the lost dark angels can intervene directly. These rules are known as the Protocols of the Hidden Age and include situations such as threats to the very existence of humanity, extreme corruption of spiritual systems, or when specific individuals demonstrate complete alignment with fundamental divine purposes. Another crucial revelation is that this war never truly ended completely. It entered a sort of active truce that allows both systems to coexist. However, prophetic texts suggest that a time will come when this truce will be broken and the lost dark angels will return to direct and visible action. This moment is described as the Great Revelation, or the return of the first guardians. The signs indicating the approach of this moment include increased public interest in hidden spiritual knowledge, the emergence of individuals with inexplicable spiritual abilities, and a growing dissatisfaction with traditional religious systems. All these phenomena suggest that humanity is unconsciously preparing for the return of the direct protection of the lost dark angels. Understanding this forgotten war completely changes our perspective on spiritual protection and our own spiritual journey. We are not simply at the mercy of random spiritual forces. We are at the center of a dual protection system that has been carefully structured to allow our development while ensuring our fundamental safety. Write Celestial War in the comments if this revelation about the dual structure of celestial protection explains confusing or contradictory spiritual experiences you've had. I want to know if you also perceive these two levels of spiritual intervention operating. Now let's move beyond the purely spiritual realm and examine the physical and archaeological evidence that proves the historical existence of knowledge about lost dark angels. What I'm going to share with you goes beyond theological speculation. These are concrete archaeological discoveries that have been systematically ignored or misinterpreted by mainstream academia. In the Mesopotamian region, especially in the archaeological sites of present-day Iraq, cuneiform tablets have been found containing detailed descriptions of entities that correspond exactly to the lost black angels. These tablets, dating from approximately 4000 BC, describe celestial guardians called Asaruludu, literally, those who protect with black fire. The descriptions are so specific that they cannot be confused with other classes of celestial beings. A particularly fascinating discovery was made in 1987 during an excavation near ancient Babylon. Archaeologists found a set of clay tablets containing specific instructions for invoking the protection of these dark guardians. Most impressively, these instructions are almost identical to practices described in Jewish apocryphal texts written thousands of years later, suggesting a continuity of knowledge that spanned multiple civilizations. In the Temple of Marduk in Babylon, reliefs were discovered depicting angelic figures with unique characteristics, wings that appear to be made of a dark substance, but which emanate a kind of black light artistically represented through special engraving techniques. These reliefs are accompanied by inscriptions that refer to these beings as the First Watchers and those who guard from the beginning. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence comes from artifacts found in the library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh. Among the more than 30,000 fragments of cuneiform tablets discovered, there is an entire section dedicated to what they called the rituals of the Dark Guardians. These tablets describe not only the existence of these angels, but also specific methods for communicating with them and requesting their intervention in crisis situations. What makes this evidence even more compelling is that it consistently appears across different Mesopotamian cultures that had no direct contact with each other. The Sumerians, Babylonians, Assyrians, and Chaldeans all possessed similar knowledge about these dark angels, using different names but describing virtually identical characteristics and functions. This cross-cultural consistency suggests that they were describing real experiences with the same spiritual beings. In Ur, Abraham's hometown, particularly intriguing evidence has been found. Recent excavations have revealed an underground temple dedicated exclusively to the guardians of the dark flame. This temple contained unique artifacts, including polished obsidian mirrors that were used in specific rituals to see through dimensions and establish eye contact with these angels. Archaeologists were perplexed by the technological sophistication of these mirrors, which possess optical properties that we have not yet been able to fully replicate. Another significant discovery was made at the Eridu complex, considered one of the oldest cities of humanity. There, tablets were found that describe in detail how the lost dark angels taught early humans advanced techniques of agriculture, metallurgy, and astronomy. These descriptions correspond exactly to Jewish traditions about how fallen angels taught forbidden knowledge to humanity. But with a crucial difference, these teachings were considered beneficial and divine, not corrupting. The artifacts from Mari, an ancient Syrian city-state, include cylinder seals that depict scenes of humans interacting directly with shadowy, angelic figures. Most fascinating is that these interactions are clearly portrayed as positive and protective. The angels are obviously protecting and guiding humans, not corrupting or deceiving them. One of the most recent and controversial discoveries occurred in 2019, when an international archaeological expedition uncovered a sealed chamber beneath the ruins of Persepolis in present-day Iran. This chamber contained inscriptions in multiple ancient languages, cuneiform, Aramaic, and Egyptian hieroglyphs, all describing the same lost, dark angels. Most strikingly, the inscriptions include activation instructions, specific methods for contacting these angels in modern times. Unfortunately, many of these discoveries never came to public attention because they don't fit the traditional archaeological narrative. Artifacts that clearly depict positive interactions with advanced spiritual entities are often classified as mythology or primitive superstition. rather than being studied as legitimate historical evidence. The pattern that emerges from this archaeological evidence is clear. Advanced ancient civilizations possessed detailed and practical knowledge about lost dark angels. They knew how to contact them, how to work with them, and how to benefit from their protection and guidance. This knowledge was not considered superstitious or dangerous. It was a fundamental part of their spiritual and governmental practices. What impresses me most is that much of this archaeological evidence includes descriptions of tangible results from interaction with dark angels. These are not merely theological speculations, but detailed accounts of protection during wars, guidance for scientific discoveries, and assistance in solving practical engineering and administrative problems. This historical continuity of practical knowledge about the lost dark angels confirms that they never truly disappeared. They were simply forgotten by modern civilization. The evidence suggests that our reconnection with these primordial guardians is not a spiritual innovation, but rather a return to humanity's oldest and most successful spiritual practices. Comment: ancient evidence. If you think modern archaeology should investigate this evidence about historical interactions between humans and advanced spiritual entities more seriously, instead of simply classifying it as mythology. Now, we will reveal one of the most fundamental and transformative truths about the lost dark angels, their central and indispensable role in the very process of world creation. This is not a theory or interpretation. It is a cosmic reality that explains why these angels possess such unique authority and power, and why their presence is absolutely fundamental to the continued maintenance of physical existence. In the creation accounts we traditionally know, God creates through the Word, the divine breath, the separation between light and darkness. But the oldest and most complete texts reveal that this creation process was not a divine monologue. It was a collaboration between God and the dark angels, who functioned as active and conscious instruments of the divine creative will. They were not merely witnesses to creation, but direct co-participants in the process. When God said, "Let there be light," the dark angels were responsible for shaping and directing this primordial light. Their black fire nature allowed them to absorb, concentrate, and redistribute divine creative energy in a precise and controlled manner. They functioned as spiritual lenses that focused God's infinite will into specific and structured manifestations. The process of separating light and darkness was not a simple division, but rather a complex operation that required the dark angels to establish the fundamental laws governing the interaction between spiritual energy and physical matter. They created the dimensional interfaces that would allow the spiritual realm to influence physical reality without destroying it with its infinite intensity. During the creation of the heavens and the earth, the dark angels were responsible for establishing the anchoring points that keep our physical dimension connected to its spiritual source. These anchoring points function as cosmic transformers, reducing the intensity of divine energy to levels that physical matter can withstand, but maintaining a constant connection that allows for life, growth, and evolution. One of the most fascinating revelations is that the dark angels were the creators of the patterns of harmony that govern all the natural laws we know. Gravity, electromagnetism, nuclear forces, all these phenomena are manifestations of energy patterns established by the dark angels during the creation process. They are not merely natural laws, but rather direct extensions of the wisdom and intelligence of these primordial guardians. When the time came to create life, the dark angels assumed an even more direct role. They were responsible for seeding all life forms with a special spark that connects each living being directly to its divine source. This spark is not merely biological life. It is an active spiritual connection that allows each life form to participate consciously or unconsciously in the ongoing creative purpose. In the specific case of human creation, the dark angels had a unique and special role. When God formed man from the dust of the earth, it was these angels who prepared this dust in a special way, imbuing it with latent capabilities that would allow humans to function as conscious co-creators. They essentially programmed our physical matter with unique spiritual potentials. The moment when God breathed the breath of life into Adam's nostrils was facilitated by the dark angels, who created a kind of dimensional channel that allowed the pure divine essence to be transferred to a physical body without destroying it. This process was so delicate and complex that it required all the wisdom and skill of the primordial guardians to be successfully executed. Another crucial function of the dark angels in creation was to establish the renewal cycles that keep all of creation in a constant state of revitalization. They created regeneration systems that operate on multiple levels, from cellular renewal in living organisms to cosmic cycles that renew entire galaxies. Without these cycles, actively maintained by the dark angels, all of creation would degrade and cease to exist. The dark angels were also responsible for creating the reserves of creative energy that allow creation to continue expanding and evolving. They established dimensional repositories of pure energy that can be accessed when new levels of complexity and beauty need to manifest in creation. These reserves ensure that there will always be energy available for growth, healing, and transformation. During the creation of the Garden of Eden, the dark angels had complete freedom to experiment with more advanced forms of harmony between spirit and matter. Eden was not merely a physical place, but a cosmic laboratory where they tested the maximum possibilities of integration between the spiritual and physical dimensions. Every plant, every animal, every element of paradise was a masterpiece of spiritual engineering created by the dark angels. Perhaps the most striking aspect of the dark angels' involvement in creation is that they established emergency protocols that can be activated if creation faces threats to its fundamental existence. These protocols give them the authority to intervene directly in physical reality, temporarily altering natural laws if necessary to preserve the continuity of creation. This understanding completely revolutionizes our perspective on our own existence. We are not accidental products of random natural processes. We are conscious and intentional creations of a partnership between God and the wisest and most powerful dark angels. Every aspect of our existence has been carefully planned and implemented by these primordial guardians. More importantly, this means that our connection with the dark angels is not optional or secondary. It is fundamental to our functioning as created beings. They are not only our protectors, but literally our co-creators, and our conscious collaboration with them is an integral part of the purpose for which we were created. Leave a comment saying co-creators if this understanding of the role of dark angels in creation resonates with some deep intuition you've always had about your own nature and purpose as a human being. We now come to one of the most controversial and misunderstood revelations about the lost black angels, their complex relationship with the Nephilim and the giants who existed on Earth before the flood. This connection has been completely distorted by traditional religious interpretations, creating one of the greatest theological confusions in history. And the truth I am about to reveal will drastically change your understanding of this mysterious era of humanity. First, we need to clear up a fundamental misconception. The lost dark angels are not the same sons of God who united with the daughters of men to beget the Nephilim. This is a completely mistaken interpretation that arose when knowledge about different angelic classes was lost. The sons of God mentioned in Genesis 6 were a completely different angelic order, the rebellious watchers who abandoned their celestial positions for carnal desire. The lost dark angels, on the other hand, were specifically assigned to deal with the crisis caused by the presence of the Nephilim on Earth. When the rebellious watchers began to corrupt the human lineage through crossbreeding, creating a race of hybrid giants that threatened to destroy the genetic and spiritual purity of humanity, the dark angels received divine authorization to intervene directly in the situation. This intervention was neither simple nor easy. The Nephilim were not only physically gigantic, they possessed spiritual abilities inherited from their angelic parents that made them extremely powerful and dangerous. They could manipulate dimensional energies, possessed superhuman physical strength, and many developed abilities that today we would consider magical or supernatural. The role of the dark angels was to create a kind of spiritual containment force that limited the powers of the Nephilim and prevented them from causing even greater harm to humanity and the very fabric of creation. They established energy fields that partially neutralized the giants' hybrid abilities, forcing them to rely more on their physical strength and less on their inherited spiritual powers. A fascinating discovery in ancient texts is that not all Nephilim were evil. Some of them, especially those of the first generation, maintained a connection to divine purposes and attempted to use their powers to protect humanity rather than oppress it. The dark angels developed methods to distinguish between corrupt Nephilim and those who remained aligned with the divine will. The dark angels worked closely with the benevolent Nephilim, teaching them how to use their hybrid powers constructively. These benevolent giants became guardians of human communities, protectors against other corrupted creatures, and even teachers who imparted advanced knowledge of agriculture, astronomy, and technology to early humanity. However, the situation became untenable when the corrupt Nephilim began to reproduce among themselves, creating subsequent generations of increasingly distorted and violent giants. These second and third generation giants completely lost any connection to divine purposes and became predators of humanity, creating systems of forced worship and human sacrifices. It was at this point that the lost dark angels made the most difficult decision of their existence. They agreed to support the divine plan to purify the earth through the universal flood. This decision was extraordinarily painful for them because it meant allowing the destruction of many of their own protective creations and even some benevolent Nephilim who had become their allies. During the period leading up to the flood, the dark angels secretly worked to preserve as much knowledge and pure genetic lineages as possible. They guided Noah not only in building the ark, but also in the specific selection of which animal and human lineages should be preserved to ensure adequate genetic diversity in the post-flood era. One particularly intriguing revelation is that some benevolent Nephilim were secretly preserved by the dark angels through means that the texts describe as dimensional suspension. These giant allies were placed in a kind of spiritual stasis in parallel dimensions, awaiting a future moment when they could return to help humanity again. The dark angels also established special genetic archives that preserved not only physical DNA, but also the spiritual signatures of all species and lineages that were lost in the flood. These archives remain under their protection and can be accessed when needed to restore lost diversity or correct genetic problems that arise in humanity. After the flood, the dark angels assumed the responsibility of monitoring humanity much more closely to ensure that the corruption that led to the age of the Nephilim would never be repeated. They established early warning systems that detect any attempt by other spiritual entities to interfere with human genetics or corrupt our bloodlines. Interestingly, the texts suggest that some of the knowledge and technologies that the benevolent Nephilim had developed were preserved by the dark angels and are gradually reintroduced to humanity when our spiritual maturity reaches appropriate levels. Many of the sudden discoveries in science and technology may actually be rediscoveries of ancient knowledge preserved by the dark angels. This accurate understanding of the relationship between the lost dark angels and the Nephilim reveals that these primordial guardians are literally responsible for preserving the purity of humanity. They are our genetic and spiritual protectors, ensuring that we maintain our original divine connection as we evolve and develop. Right purity preserved. If this revelation about the protective role of the dark angels during the age of the Nephilim makes you feel a deep gratitude for a protection you didn't even know existed, now we come to the most practical and transformative aspect of all this knowledge: how the lost dark angels continue to influence and protect our current reality, even operating in a veiled way. What I am about to reveal will completely change your perspective on seemingly coincidental events in your life and on how you can consciously collaborate with this ancestral protection. The lost dark angels never ceased their protective activities. They simply adapted their methods to the conditions of the modern age. While in the past they could intervene more directly and visibly, today they work through what we call directed synchronicities, events that appear to be coincidences, but which are actually carefully orchestrated interventions to protect or guide us. Think of the times you accidentally missed a flight that later ran into problems, or when you coincidentally met the exact person who had the information or help you needed at a crucial moment. Think of the times when a sudden and inexplicable intuition made you change direction, and you later discovered that it protected you from some danger. These are not random coincidences. They are direct interventions of dark angels operating within the limitations of the veiled age. One of the most fascinating ways in which they influence our current reality is through what ancient texts call planting insights. Dark angels can implant ideas, solutions, and understandings directly into our consciousness, causing us to have sudden realizations that help us solve problems or avoid difficulties. Many of our best ideas and wisest decisions are actually unconscious collaborations with these guardians. They also operate through networks of human influence, subtly guiding key people to be in the right places at the right times to offer us help, protection, or guidance. That unknown person who suddenly appeared to help you when you were in trouble, or the professional who casually mentioned exactly the information you needed. Often these people are being unconsciously guided by dark angels to be instruments of your protection. In the modern digital age, lost dark angels have developed incredibly sophisticated methods of influencing our reality through technology. They can interfere with electronic systems to prevent accidents, guide algorithms so that important information reaches us at the right time, and even influence social networks to connect people who need to meet for protective or guidance purposes. One area where their influence is particularly evident is in protection against negative spiritual manipulation. With the rise of unbalanced occult practices and the proliferation of confusing spiritual energies in the modern age, dark angels have intensified their energy cleansing activities. They create protective fields around people who are genuinely seeking spiritual growth, neutralizing attempts at negative influence or manipulation. The dark angels are also actively involved in what we might call a collective spiritual awakening that is happening globally. They are gradually removing veils of ignorance and superstition, allowing more people to access genuine spiritual knowledge. The explosive growth of interest in spirituality, alternative medicine, and consciousness practices is not accidental. It is a project coordinated by the primordial guardians. They work especially through dreams and meditative states to establish direct communication with us. Many people report incredibly vivid and meaningful dreams that provide clear guidance for specific situations, or meditative experiences where they receive profound insights that transform their understanding of important life decisions. These are often direct communications from our assigned shadow guardian. One of the most powerful ways in which dark angels influence our current reality is through what we call activation of latent potentials. When we are aligned with genuine divine purposes, they can activate capacities and abilities within us that would normally remain dormant. This explains why some people suddenly develop psychic abilities, healing powers, or extraordinary creative talents seemingly out of nowhere. The dark angels also maintain a constant vigil over what we call critical timelines, moments in our individual and collective futures where specific decisions will have major consequences for our spiritual development. They work actively to ensure that these decisions are made from a place of wisdom rather than fear or ignorance. In terms of global events, os anjos sombrios estão constantly working para minimize potential disasters and redirect human collective energy toward mais positive outcomes. Many catastrophes could have been much worse for mitigated per their intervention, and many positive developments that seem miraculously coordinated are actually resultado de their behind-the-scenes work. For those who become aware of their presence and learn to work cooperatively with them, dark angels can provide much more direct guidance and protection. They respond particularly well to requests made during moments of genuine spiritual clarity, when our personal agenda is aligned with larger divine purposes. The key to strengthening our connection with these primordial guardians is developing what ancient texts call spiritual discernment, an ability to distinguish between our own ego-driven desires and genuine spiritual guidance. When we consistently choose to align our will with higher wisdom, the dark angels can work much more effectively through our lives. Understanding how the lost dark angels continue to influence our current reality empowers us to become conscious participants in our own protection and growth. Instead of being passive recipients of their help, we can learn to recognize their interventions and actively collaborate with their efforts to protect and guide humanity. Leave a comment saying conscious collaboration if you've already started noticing patterns of protection and guidance in your life that go beyond mere coincidence and want to learn how to work more consciously with these primordial guardians. We have now arrived at the culmination of this entire revelation, the prophecy of the return of the original celestial guard, which marks the end of the age of veiled protection and the beginning of a new phase in the relationship between humanity and the lost dark angels. This prophecy is not merely a possible future, it is a certainty that is rapidly approaching, and the signs of its manifestation are happening all around us at this very moment. The oldest prophecies, found in texts that predate any religious institution, describe a specific moment in human history when the primordial guardians would emerge from their hidden operation and retake direct, visible control of humanity's spiritual protection. This moment is described consistently across multiple ancient traditions as the Great Unveiling or the Return of the First Guardians. According to these prophetic texts, the trigger for this return would be a combination of three specific conditions. First, when humanity reaches a level of spiritual maturity sufficient to handle direct contact with these powerful beings. Second, when the corruption of traditional religious systems reaches a point where they're actually hindering rather than helping spiritual development. And third, when existential threats to humanity itself require direct intervention from the primordial guardians. Examining nossa current global situation, podemos clearly see que all three conditions estão rapidly being met. The explosive growth in spiritual seeking outside traditional religious frameworks indicates que humanity is developing uma mature understanding de spirituality. The widespread disillusionment with institutional religion shows que these systems são no longer adequately serving their intended purpose. E as ameaças existenciais from climate change, nuclear weapons, artificial intelligence, and genetic manipulation clearly require intervention from higher wisdom. The first visible signs of the return have already begun manifesting in the last decades. The dramatic increase in people reporting angelic encounters, especially encounters with beings that don't match traditional angelic descriptions, indicates that dark angels are testing humanity's readiness for direct contact. Many of these experiences involve beings of extraordinary power who appear dark or shadowy, but emanate profound love and protection. Another significant sign is sudden emergence de individuals com unexplained spiritual abilities que don't fit any known psychic or religious categories. These people often report direct guidance from protective beings who they describe as ancient, powerful, somehow familiar, despite never having met them before. They're often given specific tasks related para protecting or teaching others, suggesting que they're being prepared as intermediaries para o coming transition. The technological breakthroughs we're experiencing also align perfectly com prophetic descriptions. Os textos antigos describe how the return of the original guardians would be preceded by developments in human technology que would make direct angelic intervention more believable and less disruptive para society. Virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and quantum physics have created a cultural context onde interdimensional beings and advanced consciousness no longer seem impossible. Geopolitical changes also reflect prophetic patterns. The breakdown of traditional power structures, a rise to grassroots movements, and increasing awareness of global interconnectedness all prepare humanity para accepting guidance from sources que transcend national or religious boundaries. Os anjos negros perdidos belong para no single religion or culture. They're humanity's original protectors, predating all our divisive categories. Environmental changes, including extreme weather patterns and unusual celestial phenomena, match descriptions found in the ancient prophecies with remarkable accuracy. These texts describe how the return would be preceded by signs in the heavens and unusual manifestations on earth. They would serve como warnings para those who understand their significance while being dismissed by skeptics as natural phenomena. Perhaps most significantly, we're seeing the emergence to what the prophecies call recognition resonance. Increasing numbers to people who encounter information about the anjos negros perdidos experience immediate, deep recognition, as if they're remembering something they've always known. This suggests que the spiritual connection between humanity e estes guardiães primordiais é being reactivated in preparation para their return. According para the prophetic timeline, the actual return will occur in stages rather than a single dramatic event. First will come increased direct intervention in critical situations, preventing disasters, guiding important decisions, and protecting key individuals who are working toward humanity's highest good. Then we'll see more frequent visible manifestations, beginning with people who are spiritually prepared, gradually expanding para larger populations. The middle phase involves what the texts call educational disclosure. Structured teaching programs on selected humans will receive direct instruction from the anjos negros about advanced spiritual principles, healing techniques, and technologies that will help humanity navigate upcoming challenges. This knowledge will then be gradually disseminated through various channels para prepare broader populations. The final phase is described as conscious collaboration, a time when humanity works openly and directly with the lost dark angels to address global challenges, develop advanced technologies, and evolve spiritually. This phase marks the beginning of a new age where spiritual and material development proceed in perfect harmony under the guidance of our original guardians. The time frame for these events, according para multiple prophetic sources, aligns remarkably bem concurrent global trends. Most texts suggest that the initial phases já began, que we're currently entering the increased intervention period, e que educational disclosure should begin within the next decade or two. For individuals who understand this prophetic pattern, there are specific steps we can take para prepare ourselves and assist com this monumental transition. Developing genuine spiritual discernment, practicing compassionate service para others, and maintaining openness para unconventional spiritual experiences all prepare us para more direct contact com estes guardians. The return of the lost dark angels represents not just a restoration of ancient protection, but a fundamental upgrade in humanity's relationship with divine guidance. We're moving from an era where we stumbled along with incomplete spiritual knowledge to an age where we have direct access to the wisdom and power of our original creators and protectors. This transformation will affect every aspect to human existence, our understanding to spirituality, our technological development, NASA social structures, and our relationship com the natural world. We stand at the threshold de uma new phase in human evolution, guided by beings who have loved and protected us since our creation. The question isn't whether this return will happen, it's whether we'll be ready para receive these ancient guardians come the wisdom and maturity they deserve, and whether we'll embrace NASA destiny as conscious participants in the divine plan for our planet. Leave ready for the return in the comments if you feel that deep sense of anticipation and preparation for something magnificent that is approaching. Something that will transform not just your individual spiritual journey, but the future of all humanity. If you've made it this far, you're part of a very special group of people who are genuinely ready to learn spiritual truths that go beyond anything traditional religions have ever taught. Knowledge about the lost dark angels isn't just historical information. It's a key to completely transforming your spiritual protection and your connection to higher divine purposes. Subscribe to the channel right now if you feel this knowledge resonates deeply with something you've always intuitively known but never been able to explain. Leave a like to help this content reach other people who are also ready to discover their original spiritual heritage. Comment: Primordial Guardians. If you feel you are ready to learn practical methods for establishing conscious communication with the lost dark angels and actively working with the oldest and most powerful celestial protection available to humanity. And don't forget to watch the next video that will appear on the screen, where I will reveal specific and safe techniques that you can use to recognize when dark angels are intervening in your life and how to consciously amplify this divine protection. This is just the beginning of a spiritual journey that will change everything you thought you knew about angels, protection, and your own destiny as a human being protected by the primordial guardians of creation.